is where I think that we need to look at setting up the first 6 inches of a case, and it starts with your treatment plan. And that starts out, like we said earlier, like medical necessity says. It says neuromusculoskeletal diagnosis, direct therapeutic relationship, all the way to the outcome. And the outcome must be measurable. So let's look at it. It makes total sense now. We have our diagnosis. Let's say this is a low back case, 739.3 lumbar segmental dysfunction. We're going to do an adjustment 3 times per week for 4 weeks, and our baseline way to 8 hours of driving. And then we have lumbar disc. We're going to do traction. We're going to do it at the same time 3 times a week for 4 weeks, and we're going to use a pain scale for that. And then we have a spasm code. We're going to do E-stim. We're going to have same frequency and duration. We're going to talk about the number of spasms from 8 down to 2 in the next 4 weeks. And then we have a postural distortion. We're going to do some exercise, frequency and duration, the same thing. And we're going to deal with our baseline goal of minus 4 inches of forward head posture, and we're going to try and get the head over the shoulders to 0 inches of forward head posture. So do you see here how everything must be measured? And if you want to put in an outcomes tool, I know Building Precision includes that, the Quad VAS has a baseline and a goal. You can put it right in your treatment plan, and it has to be measured. Remember, these are all things that can be measured. Currently, I see a lot of people that say, I want to improve subluxation. Well, that's a great idea. The problem is we can't measure it. It's hard to measure subluxation. What are we measuring? Well, I'm measuring range of motion. Well, that's great. If you measure range of motion, I've seen people get adjusted and have their range of motion return in 1 visit or just a couple of visits. But that never addressed their ability to function or their endurance to be able to do things. Same thing with pain. We've addressed pain before in the past, and the majority of our problem is when we see that a patient with major arthritis is going to have pain for a long period of time, and the pain never goes away. Same thing with range of motion. Range of motion can go away quickly or never go away as a problem. Same thing with pain. It can go away quickly or never go away, and if it goes away quickly, we're done with medical necessity in a couple visits. If it never goes away and we don't have anything functional to measure, we can be very, very clouded in what we're doing, meaning we end up treating the patient for longer than we need to, and that's the problem we're dealing with, we showed earlier, with dealing with chronic care. Unless we have something measurable, then we never know when to pull the ripcord when we jump out of a plane. Never know when to deploy the canopy. We hit the ground at 100% miles an hour.
John, excuse me, but the doctors that are corrective care based, the CT, Pedabon, Clear, et cetera, that do measure objectively on an X-ray, I know it's not functional necessarily. I know you did mention function, but that is something that I could show that is a subluxation on an X-ray, and I could show, by research terms anyway, how long I think it should take to correct that. Where does that play into this?
That's a great question, and the answer is that when we're dealing with the difference between posture and curvature, they're 2 different things. We've seen patients have good posture, but their curve on X-ray is still not as good as good as it should be or where it should be, and that's a problem. So these things that we're talking about measured are not necessarily related to a curvature on X-ray issue. They're related to functional endurance. So we're talking about what are the muscles doing. We're talking about functional necessity, meaning what can the patient do to get them back to pre-accident status, or back to, depending on if it's comp or if it's Medicare, can we get them to, as best we can get them to, or maximum medical improvement, that type of thing. So we can't really confuse the 2. We have to make sure that we set up true functional goals on things that can be externally measured. We can't wait on an X-ray to be taken 3 months later or 90 days later. We have to talk about what can be functionally measured on the patient from the outside, which means that there's a difference between what would be covered versus what the patient actually needs. And like I said before, it's the difference between medical necessity versus, ideal functional wellness. So the difference between the 2. And once again, my goal is to make sure people make the right person pay. And once the patient has reached as good as they're going to get, it doesn't mean that we're done. We're still trying to improve. We're still trying to deal with curve. We're still trying to deal with the patient's ability to function. But once it starts to get to the point where the improvement is really, really slow and we can't measure it, then we have to transition the patient from active care into wellness care. So after we've decided, where the patient is and we've met everything, then we can go ahead at the end. Now it makes sense. We're going to deal with the issues of a discharge summary. What were my goals? My goals were to get the patient to drive 8 hours. We met that goal. Okay. Unfortunately, my forward head posture only got to -1 inch. Why? Because I had major arthritis. The patient has reached MMI, therefore I'm going to release them from active care into wellness care. The patient's accepted once every 2 weeks in wellness care until the patient comes back or returns from the new injury. And that's how you would deal with a discharge summary at the end of a treatment plan of something like this.
I want you to know is if you're interested in getting more information from John, you can always email him at daviladc@gmail.com. His phone number is there on the screen, 843-344-2960. I know for our clients, John, I guess in general you do this with any client. You can do a Medicare documentation review, and here's what it is: a review of Medicare file to check to see if all Medicare requirements are met and a file could pass a Medicare audit. Now that's from day one, not just medical necessity like you explained during this webinar, but also for billing precision clients specifically. Now that we have the more configurable documentation system where you can kind of customize your buttons and things like that, John will go in to your notes, look at your files, tell you if there is a situation where where you could make improvements, or if you're missing things just generally in your files, but also look at your notes and discuss with you what could be changed, whether it's some macro buttons or things like that, or just practically you could just add some things or subtract some things from the notes that you do take currently. Now,
no, I think that that your ability is unmatched in order to help doctors track what they do, and that is something that most people, in everyday practice get lost in. And I think that's the issue when doctors start dealing with patients. They get so into dealing with patients, and that's something that we're really, really good at, is dealing with patients. Unfortunately, we sometimes get to the point where we don't see the forest through the trees, and we forget where we are sometimes. And your ability to tell them, hey, listen, you're over so many days on this, and just be careful, and to give them the prompts is something that's just invaluable. And that was I don't know how you did it, but that's great stuff.
Well, good. I'm glad. One of the other things, too, is with billing precision, what you could do with John is give him admin access to your account on a regular basis or semi-regular basis or as needed, where John can go into your billing precision account and pull records on a regular basis and give you basically a proactive audit of Medicare, but not just Medicare files. You also do the major med and other files, right, John?
Yeah, in fact, one of the biggest things that we're doing now is helping docs with their PI profile, and that's something that's new that most people aren't looking at. If you go out and you look at what your profile looks like to Colossus, which is the program that will adjudicate how much your claim is worth, what a patient's claim is worth from their accident. But it also looks at the value of your documentation, and what the case is worth in the very beginning is really truly based on, is the attorney's profile any good, and is your profile any good? And your profile is 100% based on your documentation. And what we started doing for clients is, hey, you have a PI case, and you're documenting it like a major med case, you're treating it like a PI, like a Medicare case. That could actually hurt your PI status, and that would decrease the value of your claim before you even see the patient. So it just lowers your value within their system. So what we've started to do is help doctors repair their PI or their Colossus scores and help them start to see or realize easier settlements and easier case values and higher case values with PI cases, which depending on what state you're in, is a bigger issue than anything else that's out there right now.
Right. Yeah, I know New Jersey, where we are, there's a ton of change happening up here. Another thing John's great at is helping configure care plans, and we're integrated with Cash Practice. I know you've worked with Cash Practice in the past, and helping doctors create compliant, quote-unquote, compliant care plans and relative to the type of practice they have, and even cash practices where fully cash practices, which we have clients that are 100% cash, that even just because you call yourself cash doesn't mean that there's not some compliance requirements, especially when it comes to documentation. So anyway, John is our go-to guy right now when it comes to this stuff. I mean, he's always reliable and dependable and always responsive, and has a wealth of knowledge. So if you have any compliance questions, concerns, I would definitely go through John and get that information taken care of. Again, email address, phone number there on the screen. So John, thank you so much for the information. I look forward to having you on again for some other webinars, and just to kind of work out the kinks and get those really difficult questions answered that I know I get all the time. So thanks again so much.
Thank you, and look forward to that. And thanks for the kind words. It was great. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, John.